Can I quickly just indicate if someone maybe lost a USB cable? You can tell me the color and the length, and you can come and collect it from me here in front. Can I alert our program director?
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, it is 2:30. What is integrity? Anyone want to, what do we understand integrity to be? What do you think? What is integrity? Give me a guess. I hear something. If you say something, you're going to do it. Is that right? Okay, so a big part of professionalism is about time and integrity. So shall we act with integrity and start? Okay, fantastic. Thank you very much. So thank you for coming back. We hope that you've enjoyed your lunch. Our sincerest apologies for the logistical arrangements around lunch and the delays that you may have experienced in getting through to get your meal, but we hope that you were able to access a meal and have a comfortable lunch. We're now going into the afternoon session, and it's the third slot that we have. We hope that you also, before I get further, we hope that by now you have all been able to access the microsite. Can I just get an indication if anyone's still struggling to get to the microsite? With a raise of hands, anyone? Okay. Salga technical team, to anyone with a raised hand who's struggling with the microsite, please can you provide support? You will notice that since I last spoke to you this morning, the presentations from the course of the morning have now been loaded onto the microsite under day one. So it is live and it is happening, and do keep an eye on that. Another short administrative request to you. there are a box of IDs that are sitting at the KZN registration table. If you may have left your ID there because of your CPD points, please do ensure that you collect your ID before you leave today, just so that those important documents don't get lost. So what month are we in? What month is it? Oh, Feb, but what's it also called? The month of love. Okay, so we're feeling particularly generous today. And one of our sponsors has given us some hampers to hand out. And in the spirit of love and generosity, we'd like to give out a couple of gifts this afternoon. You want to play a little bit? Okay, so I have a question. A simple one. Who is the first one to respond, first hand up, is going to be the recipient of the gift. Well, first hand up and to answer the question correctly. No. Okay, so who is the acting CEO of Salga at present? Ma'am with the white shirt. Ma'am, there you go. The lady with the white shirt at the back who stood up, ma'am. Yes, yourself. Thank you. Come through that you got the first gift. Thank you. Let's give a round of applause. Okay. I'm sorry to point at you. I don't know your names, but please come through the front. And you'll generously receive your gift from Bonitas, who's one of our sponsors for the event. We hope that you enjoy it and that you have a healthy 2023. Okay, you have a question, sir? Oh, okay. The second question, and we got to keep it quick. From which organization was our keynote speaker? The lady with the blue. The lady with the blue. Karen is saying the lady with the blue. Karen, you want to help us and go with the mic? If she, yes.
From the African National Congress.
Ah.
I'm afraid.
Whoops.
The organization.
Whoops. Okay, whoops. Let's try again. I see the lady in my line. Yeah, the lady with the lanyard. Yeah. Thank you, Mistra. Thank you very much. Come through for your gift. We need to gender balance this a little bit, colleagues. We hope that you enjoy your gift, ma'am, and that you have a healthy 2023 from Bonitas. Before the question, okay. This is our third and final question for our session before lunch. What was the name of the presenter who provided the anchor input for the session before lunch, session 2? Can you see? Karen says the gentleman who's standing. Yes, sir. Sorry? Is that right? Advocate.
He's wrong.
Sorry. One more. Another try. The gentleman at the back who's been standing and yelling. Karen? Yeah. The gentleman at the back.
So what's your answer?
Sorry?
He's correct.
Thank you. And then we have a male colleague who's also won the prize. So thank you. And we hope that you enjoy your gift from Bonitas. And we wish you a healthy 2023. For tomorrow, we ask that you come in time because we have a couple of more hampers to hand out from our generous sponsors. So before we end today, we'll talk about what time are we starting tomorrow. We've got a very tight afternoon And to our virtual audience, welcome back to you as well. And apologies again for the delay. One of our challenges is that this venue that we currently seated in is going to be the venue for this evening session. So we are aiming to finish by 4:30 in order to give the venue the time to do what they need to do for the evening session. So to the panelists and the speakers, I'm asking for your support also to help us manage time. We now going straight into session 3. And the focus of this session is around making the most of big data, the role of data analytics in leveraging performance management in local government. We have all our panelists up on stage already. The manner in which we're going to run this session under Rachel as the moderator is going to be as follows. We're going to have an anchor input from Mr. Nodada, after which Rachel will come on to introduce her panel and their speakers to take us into a discussion. As you listen to the speakers, this is an extremely interesting session. Please make note of your questions if you're physically in the room so that you can pose it to our panelists when we do break for Q&A. And if you're virtually connecting with us, you're able to then put your questions onto the chat function. The technical team is keeping an eye on that, and we'll try to make sure that your questions are elevated through to our panelists. So by way of introduction, Mr. Nodada is the Performance Management Executive Management Consultant at 21st Century. But I can welcome you, Mr. Nodada, to come on and talk to us about how big data underpins effective performance management systems. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Fatima, for that lovely introduction. And thank you to Salga for this invitation to speak to you all today. I am going to be cognizant of time, and I'll try my best not to rush through this presentation. And if I can just ask our technical team to please put up my presentation so I know what I'm talking about. Technical team, hello? Hi. Thank you. Thank you very much. So yes, of course, in the interest of time, we're going to jump straight into the matter. I'd also like to thank my panelists for joining me here today. Perfect. Just a few of the topics we'll be discussing. We're going to discuss big data. I'm going to give you a quick definition of what it is that we're talking about. We'll discuss a few organizational design principles, objectives and key results, and then we're going to go into employee performance management before looking at some technology anchors which we use at 21st Century to support our consulting work. Thank you, Karen. Great. So question number one would be, what is big data? And big data can very simply be defined as data that is so large in size, it's so voluminous, and it's growing exponentially over time that traditional technologies such as Excel cannot actually effectively process this information and give you great analytics based off of it. To give you an example of what big data looks like, the New York Stock Exchange generates about 1 terabyte of data per day. Facebook generates over 500 terabytes of data per day. And for those of you who flew here this morning, a jet engine on the plane can generate around 10 terabytes of data every 30 minutes of flight time. So what we're referring to here is a data set that is just continuously moving and growing, and there's just more and more and more data coming in. So it's about the flow of the data and the accuracy of. There we go. Thank you. It's about the flow of the data. So we're referring here not to data that is static, but that is in constant motion and that is coming into the organization at a steady rate or at an exponentially growing rate. Of this presentation, we've written it up in a detailed way because I understand you all have a chance to look at the presentations after the session. So I'll be speaking to the information rather than reading the contents that are on it. And what I've included in this in the presentation is a general overview of everything you would need to know. However, I'll be focusing on specific components of it. On this particular slide, there's 3 things that I'd like you to focus on, please, and that is your volume, your velocity, and your veracity. That is how accurate it is, how much data you're dealing with, and how fast it's rolling in. So where is it that this data comes from? There's 2 general sources of data, right? When you categorize where your data comes from, the one is internal, which is kind of your historical documentation, anything sitting in your CRM or your ERP systems, and any historical documentation that you have within an organization, such as the massive digitization of historical documentation that government is embarking on at the moment. Your other sources of data are more external. You can look at, for example, your smartphone, the internet, any sites that offer you access to data, such as the World Bank or any other organizations of that nature. And this is generally where you would find your data from. Now, the most important part of this process is understanding how to build a multi-layered data architecture. So without going into too much detail on here, I'm just going to focus on a few of the elements. The first, of course, is your data sources. You must continuously seek out new data sources, and with the understanding that sometimes the missing data is actually more important than the data that you have. To give you a quick example, if you are flying a plane during a war and all the planes that come back have bullets, but none on the body of the plane, that means that the place that you need to put your armor on the plane is on the body of the plane and not on the wings, because the wings are the ones that manage to actually make it back. So all the planes that don't make it back are the ones that need to be protected so that you can keep them as well. So where would you need to armor something? It would be in the place where the data was missing rather than the data that you actually had. So whenever you are sourcing data, you need to ensure that you can look not only at what data you have, but remain cognizant of what data you do not have and what that actually means. But to go deeper into this slide, you have your data sourcing, which is your step 1. And to me, the most important message I'd like to impart here today, whether you are using technology or not, you need to be able to constantly source and identify sources for your data. However it is that you are recording it, this is the most important component. We are now in a world that has advanced to an AI stage, right? And the step 1 of all of these processes, whether you are adopting technology, whether you're looking at installing chatbots to deliver services to people, however it is that you'd like to go about it, you just need to start by sourcing that data, knowing where it sits and collecting it effectively. So that's step 2. You have your data collection. And then I'm going to skip the ingestion layer and go straight for the storage layer, because storage is very important. How it is that you're storing your data so that you are able to actually feed it into the various systems that you might be using in your organization, with the understanding that different systems consume data in various different ways. After that, of course, you have your processing of your data. You have your data querying and then data analytics. This is when you get your data scientists coming in to analyze your data and produce insights, and where your tools such as Power BI start coming into play. Thereafter, it's essentially visualization, your graphs, your security, which is Poppea, and monitoring and evaluating your data to make sure that it is accurate. Great. So, okay. Technology does not seem to be on my side today. Ooh, okay, cool. So just a few principles that inform organizational design that I'd like to speak to. And the most important one I'm going to mention here is one thing: strategic alignment. That is the one thing that appears to be missing. I was having such a robust discussion with my colleagues before coming up on stage, and we were having quite an intense discussion on how it is that you actually ensure that when employees in an organization are scoring high in their performance evaluations, those results are able to translate into organizational performance. And this is where a lot of organizations tend to struggle. Another area in which organizations, whether you're private sector, public sector, it doesn't really matter, where they tend to struggle is translating strategy and organizational performance beyond the senior management layer, where it is felt that managers and junior managers and general staff and workers don't know what the strategic objectives of the organization are, but everyone from senior management up can articulate them to a certain degree, and very often not very well. There's no concrete understanding of what it is that the organization is trying to do. But rather than trying to ensure that everyone has a clear enough understanding of overall strategy for the organization, it is actually more important that we make sure that whatever it is that is in their performance agreement, which they understand fully and adopt, is directly aligned to the strategy and performance of your organization. Because once we align their performance agreement, it does not really matter how well they understand the overall objectives of an organization. The most important thing is that all of their actions, their results, their activities, and the outcomes that they pursue are in line with the strategic objectives of the organization as a whole. So without going into too much detail on the content on this slide, that is the message that I'd really like you to take away, and it's right at the beginning. The organization must have a vision and mission, and everything that takes place thereafter, whether you are defining your processes, whether you are developing your structure, whether you are doing job descriptions, personal development plans, managing your cost centers, whatever it is that you do thereafter, the most important thing that we must bear in mind is that everything must drive towards the achievement of the strategic objectives of your municipality or your organization, right? And if we make sure that every step as we cascade those KPIs and those key performance areas or key results areas, I know a lot of people use different terminology, but your KPA, essentially, each and every KPA is cascaded effectively from the organization's strategic objectives. And we're able to then say that everyone's activities are driving towards the same goal. In that case, it doesn't really matter if I fully understand what it is that we are trying to achieve overall, as long as I know my contribution and why my contribution matters. After that, of course, we can support all of this activity using systems and excellent. So, okay, someone else is playing with my presentation now. Great. So the next thing I'd like to discuss with you guys is something called objectives and key results. And this is a methodology or framework that is used to essentially guide an organization into agility. So if you look at it from a municipal perspective, what you'd be looking at is you'll have your 5-year plan, right? And then you'll have your annual performance plan, which will be descended from whichever government entity sits a level above you. But what organizations have done in order to achieve great agility, and this comes out of Silicon Valley, is something called objectives and key results. And the executives of an organization in this are expected to utilize this framework to create more focus and agility in an organization by being able to review results on a quarterly basis at an organizational level. So what this means is that every quarter, after you've done your performance evaluations, the executives would sit down and come up with 3 key objectives that define what you want to achieve over the next quarter of the year. Once you've defined those, you'll come up with a set of KPIs by which you will be measuring that. Now, this sits separately, but tied directly to the organization's strategy, right? Well, what we mean by that is that you're basically deriving an objective that you want to focus on, and you're saying, This one, we're going to focus and we're going to measure just these three things. And at the end of the quarter, we're going to check those results. And we're either going to switch focus because we have achieved what we were looking to do in the quarter, or we're going to change the target to something that makes a lot more sense. So if you look at it on the left-hand side of this slide, you have objective, key result, and target. And that's literally what you do every single quarter from an executive level. The rest of the organization then cascades just those objectives and those key results to everyone to understand exactly how they'll be achieved. The right-hand side speaks to your benchmarking, making sure that everything that you put in is directly measurable and specific, and it's verifiable, that the results that you claim to have achieved can be verified and definitely have been achieved. And this is the foundation of OKRs. How is it that you actually implement something like this? So from an OKR level, see, I'm afraid of this thing now. I don't know how well it works for me. I wish I could just click it. But how it is that you implement a framework like this is you use something we call Scrum, right? Scrum is another framework that has come out of Silicon Valley and the development of technology. And this takes place on a weekly basis. You would essentially take your OKRs from that top executive level and cascade it down to the teams that are going to be executing on the work. And each team leader, and the most important part of this is that it doesn't matter which department the team sits in, right? So you might have someone coming from IT, another person is sitting in project management, there might be an engineer involved, and whoever's required to achieve a project. Scrums are run on project basis, not on strategy basis or anything else, right? And this is about breaking down the silos that exist in organizations. Sorry. So essentially, every single week, the team is expected to meet to ensure that they're still driving those same objectives and achieving those key results that have been assigned to the project that they're working on, right? And the team leader, or what is now known as a Scrum Master, which is a role that has appeared in project management offices around the world over the last 5 to 10 years. That person is then directed to essentially make sure that the team is always driving towards the objectives that were identified right at the beginning. Okay, we run through this process on a weekly basis, and then every month we review the results and how close we are to reaching the quarterly target. Projects that are run in the organization are then run on the basis of achieving what was set out during your first step in the OKR process. Great. As people working in government, I'm sure you would have come across these SMART principles a couple of times at this stage. And this is just about what principles you apply when you are defining the objectives and the KPIs that you are putting into either an employee's performance agreement or on the overall organization. And this just simply means that whatever it is that you're going to put in, it has to be specific, it has to be measurable, it must be attainable or achievable, it must be relevant, and it must be time bound, which means there's a deadline. And if it's not achieved by the deadline, then there must be consequences, right? And this is the basis on which we draft performance agreements and we create departmental strategies and organizational strategies as well. Excellent. So then that drives us means that we must our results. And these quarterly reviews are not just done if you are implementing OKRs in an that can manage and monitor the data and the information that comes out of those discussions, right? But the key thing, which a lot of organizations have missed when it comes to individual performance management, is that it's meant to be an ongoing conversation. Worse off today, we are working from home, or at least a lot of us are working from home. So the days of your manager walking past your desk and noticing that something is missing or remembering a task he was supposed to give you are pretty much gone. At this stage, if there's no meeting scheduled with a particular individual, you will never even remember the thing that you were supposed to tell them, and it'll always fall by the wayside. So it's become so important that we encourage managers to have regular conversations and feedback with staff in order for you to prevent them from walking too far down the wrong pathway, right? If they're doing something wrong, they could end up doing the wrong thing for 6 months before you have a conversation with them, if you're only going to wait for the evaluation period to arrive. So this is why this is important. Managers must remain cognizant of the importance of speaking to their managers or their staff on a much more regular basis. And that performance evaluation is a formal process, but performance management is a daily exercise. Great. So the last thing I'd just like to talk about is some of the technology anchors that we use within 21st Century to assist organizations in doing this. On the left-hand side, at least it's on my left, on the left-hand side, we have a platform called Scientrix. And Scientrix is an overall organizational operating model design platform. I believe some people at SALGA are already familiar with it, yeah, so it's used worldwide by various organizations, including managing IT for VW Group all over the world. And then on the other side is a platform called Improve, and Improve is a system that manages individual performance. These two are tied together. They have APIs built between them, and they share data and information to be able to see very clearly where you have organizational performance and individual performance. In closing, I can close, right? Excellent. In closing, what I'd like you to look at here is just basically what it is that big data looks like. So if we look at that step-by-step multi-layered stack that I showed you earlier, when you find big data, it's scattered. It's everywhere. It's on people's phones. It's on their watches. It's on their laptops. It's on social media. It's online. It's on the cloud. It's on the laptop. It's in Excel. It's in Word. It's in PowerPoint. It's everywhere, right? And it's in people's footprints and actions. But we need to collect all that data. And I cannot emphasize this enough. Whatever data you can collect, start collecting it, because we're going to get to a point where AI is going to be so advanced that it can basically eat through your data and conduct all of your analytics for you, and even start making the last part of that, which is the decision, right? I don't recommend you allow it to make the decision. I'm just saying that it probably will be able to make that decision, okay? So the most important message, if you leave with nothing else today from everything that I've said, is please start collecting your data and collect it on whatever format you want. I recommend Excel, because from there, you'll be able to launch your data maturity journey very successfully. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Nodada. That was very interesting. It actually made me wonder about ChatGPT that I'm seeing all around. And I think that creates a room for a whole other conversation. Welcome, Mr. Chaba. Rachel, can I now introduce you and hand over to you to take us into the panel discussion on data analytics as an enabler of performance management and professionalization. Please join me in welcoming Rachel, who's the Data Architecture Senior Manager at SALGA. Rachel.
Testing 1, 2. Thank you very much, Fatima. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Rachel, and as introduced, I'm the data architecture for the organization at Salga, and I'm basically running the data unit. And I actually, before we start with my panelists, I'm excited to actually be part of this session where we are basically unpacking the role of data, particularly in the area of performance management. So just my thoughts around your presentation, Sive, it was quite insightful. And I'd like to emphasize the point around the fact that data, big data is not just about the volume of data, but it's more about how the data is harvested, how the data is brought into the different systems, and the fact that it comes in different formats. It comes in different formats, and it's sitting in a number of disparate data sources. So what's important there is that it's not just about the volume of data, but it's about the entire process, bringing the data in, storing it, and analyzing it in such a way that we derive value and meaning from the data in a whole new way. So for the panel discussion, I'm here with my colleagues. We had such an interesting discussion earlier, and I regard them as specialists and experts in their field, particularly performance management, data analytics, research, as well as digital technologies. And I would like for them to actually respond to Sive's presentation, just share their thoughts around what they picked up and also how they've implemented or how they are using data for decision-making processes in their organizations. I'll start with Thembisile, who's from Ehlanzeni, and she is the senior manager there responsible for individual performance management. And you are most welcome to share your thoughts and take us through how Ehlanzeni has been able to roll out individual performance management and the use of data.
Thank you so much. Hi, colleagues, how are you? I know it's a gravy train, but yeah, we'll try to keep it interesting. I think we all need to agree in terms of that data is the new currency. You are quite right in terms of ensuring that the decision that we are taking, informed by a decisive information. We are all aware that as local government, municipalities, we are all legislated. I'll just boil it down to our Municipal Systems Act. We are required by regulations that we must develop our IDPs for 5 years. And after that, Chapter 6 talks about SDBIP. And after that, that's when we develop our work plans. Others are calling it the scorecards. But the question that boils down is when we do our planning in terms of identifying the programs and the projects within our municipalities, do we look at the data we have? And I think municipalities, we are fortunate enough because we have the situational analysis, and that data, I'm not only talking about the community services or the community priorities or needs, I'm also talking about the demographics that we always receive from where the stats say the information, where it informs us even further in terms of the backlogs. It tells us about our population growth. Do we look at that? Do we look at our situational, analysis, your STF? Do we look at our environmental? There's one that we always leave out, our institutional data. Do we have the skills and the capacity to be able to implement the programs and the project that we identify? Without using the proper data, our plans are not going to be able to deliver the current service delivery that we have, because we are different in terms of the spaces that we operate. So if you don't consider all the data that has been given to you, analyzed and translated into, say, if you want to eradicate sewer spillages, this is what you need to do. I think that's where we need to start, because I can come up with your SMART principle, like we were saying, in terms of my work plan. But if the programs and projects within my work plan is not aligned in terms of the service delivery, then I might as well go home. I think I'm just going to boil down into Ehlanzeni briefly. We are embedded, we've cascaded individual performance in the 13-14 financial year. And in the 15-16 financial year, we migrated from the paper-based to electronic, where now everything is recorded electronically, as well as your portfolio of evidence are within the system. So we are trying as well. That's a means of gathering data. And we now have a, within the work plans baseline in terms of how have I performed last financial year, so that going forward, I can be able to see whether my work plan and the targets that I have and the indicators are driving through to ensure that I reach the objective of the institution and ultimately attaining the vision of the institution. So obviously we have the work plans, performance work plans, and then we sign performance agreements at the beginning of the financial year, and it's informed by the SDBIP. And obviously I won't forget the job description. But as municipalities, when you do that, you must ensure that I will go back to that you set up your KPIs and indicators in a SMART principle. Don't be bogus, because others will look at my work plan and say, I can be achieving that. I can't be looking at technical services work plan and think I'm going to be able to, construct a 100-meter road. I'm not in technical service and in performance. So those are the things that we need to look into. But the monitoring and evaluation, you're quite right. So if you don't do your quarterly assessment and your interim within our work plans, we already have a must-have management KPI where it talks about you now having meetings with your staff, monitoring the employees that work under you. You must also ensure that you are implementing or you are managing the budget. So those are the institutional things that we put it aside to say, whether you like it or not, you must report in terms of, are you able to meet with your staff? Do you know what they supposed to do? Obviously, they've done the work plan, but you need to monitor and able to coach and mentor them on a daily basis. I think while you are doing the year monitoring and evaluation, I think one of the key that we've picked up is now when we do our PDPs, our personal development plan, it's now aligned to the gaps that we had identified when I was being, assessed or reviewed in terms of the quarters. And it also allows the institution in tables to be able to say, you know what, we need to skill our employees on specific things. That is not SAMSAC, but that is informed by the data when we were doing assessment. The other thing that we need to consider is ensure that regardless who the employee is working, whether the employee is a general worker, whether the employee is in a strategic position, if we don't have systems to measure their performance, you could miss the opportunity to engage and retain your staff. The other opportunity that we have seen is while we're cascading the performance management system, the lower staff level are now aware what is the organizational objective and strategies and what is the vision of the institution, so that going forward, they know that this is the vision that I'm working on. I might be making tea, but if my municipal manager is not getting his or her caffeine, it will impact on their performance. That's how, we will. Then I'll also take, we had disaster in terms of now flooding. So while the team monitor whether the disaster management plan that we have in place are being able to be implemented and the risk, so that we identify gaps there to say, while you are able to do 1, 2, 3, there's gaps. It also look to say, do we need more that people don't build in lower lying areas? So those are things where, as and when you're implementing your IDPs and your SDBIP, you also pick up on those so that we are ensuring that it goes back and fit in the data so that you are able to ensure that the municipality is always reskilled and retrained. One of the things that you need to set up the processes, we had to come up in an agreement when we were cascading. We needed to find each other. So the leadership knew the objective of cascading performance management. Employees knew why they were doing performance management, as well as the labor, because we always leave out the labor. They must also, be part of the vision and the objective of cascading. And you must set up processes. Your performance management processes must be ensured that there's accountability, as well as consequence management. And as well as the final one, that you must have systems in place. In ours, we have technical committee of which it looks in terms of the draft reports of the annual one and the portfolio of evidence in your work plan. Do you achieve your objectives? Do you have portfolio of evidence that you said you're gonna provide? And then therefore, we always have disputes. So we have a dispute committee that we have established. And we had a moderating committee that also included SAGA, COGSA, and Office of the Premier that was part, and the audit committee chairperson was part of us. As I'm concluding, chairperson, in terms of, in a nutshell, I think municipalities, we need to start somewhere so that we are able to what we are doing with our performance. And if we aren't able to start, we're not gonna be knowing what is it that we are doing. And we want to reflect what is it that we are doing right and where we have gone wrong, so that in future we can be able to improve our performance management system. So I think my input is in terms of that. Thanks.
Thank you very much. And I think you've nailed it when you mentioned the alignment between institutional data with business objectives, and as well as the municipal objectives through the IDP and all the other plans that are in place in the municipal level. So I'll move over to my next panelist, Dr. Sandile Mbata, who is from eThekwini. Dr. Sandile is responsible for research, policy, and advocacy at the eThekwini municipality. Your thoughts around the presentation, and maybe also around the use of technology to drive performance management in your municipality. Please take us through that.
A very good afternoon, colleagues, and thank you so much for staying put, and hopefully you're not having any food coma at this point. Firstly, Siva, thank you so much for being kind, and I think your talk was very kind to government officials, to municipalities in particular, because you gave them a leeway and said that technology just started, they could still collect using Excel, which is it's a grave mistake if you have systems, right? But you somehow find ways to, you're probably more caring in terms of how you've approached the idea of using data for performance management, because the reality of it is that I can say this because I work for the state, so that we work for an incompetent institution. The design is incompetent, not the people. So my colleagues are cringing. There's a lot of grave mistakes that we make, primarily because the very design of the institution was always designed to fail, and that's why it's called bureaucracy. There's a lot of things that just don't move because we've designed it in such a way that it doesn't move. I'm gonna, in my reflection, mostly just looking at what eThekwini is doing, I'm gonna go deeper into that, but I just want to appreciate you for that. But one of the things I really appreciate is the line on performance management is a daily activity. Somehow we think performance management is the KPIs. Is the plans being loaded? It's the plans being reviewed. It's the plans being the final review of the plans and people getting their notches, right? And when people get notches, residents have not had water, residents have not had electricity, people still sleep on the streets, waste has not been collected, but we get a double notch, right? Because the performance says that you get a performance, you go forward, right? So I thought you would find a way to kick us in the butt a little bit by saying, well, a lot of you have moved how many notches, yet there has not been water in most part of eThekwini municipality. Most of you have not have progressed to the next level, yet people in the city of Cape Town still sleep in the streets, or whatever the case might be. I'm winking to my colleague from the city of Cape Town. So we all have problems, right? There's no cities without problems. So for me, I take a very strict approach that data is infrastructure. When you are planning any organization, if it doesn't bring data as its critical infrastructure, is it bound to fail? And this is demonstrated by the failure of many municipalities. And SALGA will attest to the failure of municipalities. And I'm not just talking category B, category C municipalities. I'm talking in category A municipalities like eThekwini, like City of Cape Town, City of Johannesburg, Ekurhuleni. The failure of municipalities is primarily because we haven't looked where we come from. We haven't looked where we are and we haven't looked where we're going. And data is the only tool and the only infrastructure that will tell you where you come from, where you are, and where you're going. The next thing is, which touches the issue of Excel, right? Is that and the issue, both the issue of Excel and the issue of the fact that we are designed to be incompetent as local government, is that you have IT or you have any department says we want to procure a system. The system is to, I'll make an example. The system is to load your leave. So you apply for your leave, you don't have to fill in any form, you do it in a system. And that system costs a lot of money, but that's all that it does. It allows you to put in your leave and approve leave. There's nothing else that it does. That silo mentality and that single use of systems and the money that we pay for single use system is problematic. The data that's coming out of there, and I really like how you started with the big data, that it exponentially growing. So I keep on telling my colleagues that data comes out as in a process, whether inadvertently, whether we mean it or not, it comes out in this big bang of our interaction with citizens continuously. When a citizen comes to pay for water, there's data that's been collected. When someone is applying for leave, there's data that's been collected. When someone, I'm not going to talk about, because we don't have the time, I'm not going to talk about the IDP, because any document, strategic documents that are static and sitting on PDFs are already outdated, and they are part of the reasons why we're where we are, right? There's no data you can collect from them because they are sitting and they're stale where they are, right? And you changing your performance plans every time your IPPs, they change, your IDP remains for the next 5 years with a little bit of review in between. So any changes that needs to take place, and the lack of agility in government means that you are still measuring people on things that you thought you will be able to do in 5 years' time, and you then went into ground zero and realized that your attitude towards water needs to change. But your water services plan can't just change immediately. It will have to wait until review because it's all a PDF, right? So I think part of what we've started to do and realize in eThekwini municipality is firstly that we need to be vulnerable. So as I rep chair, we need to be vulnerable. Vulnerability means that you're going to open a lot of things you have. So you take your data, you analyze it, and you make it available to the public so the public can measure what you're doing. So don't pretend like it's your data, because no government person owns data, right? I know others are cringing, oh, Poppy, data security, that you can sort out. You don't put people's IDs. So performance begins when you are installing an infrastructure, when you are capturing the data from that system. So part of what we started doing is collecting or integrating city level data. So we've done with human capital, we've put all the human capital data and say, in order for us to understand the performance of the institution, you need to know who's in the institution, right? If you can't collect waste, you must know how many people are there that are meant to collect waste, but they are not. That's how you start to measure your performance, right? If you are paying a lot of overtime for people to collect waste, and you know that there's issues there. So I think for me, what is important, what has come out here is the importance of data as a critical infrastructure, and importance, and see, I really like that you said that, is that performance, it is not at uploading of plans or development of plans and reviewing of plans, but it's an everyday process as you interact with your citizens, and the data does not lie. It will tell you the truth on how you're performing. You could lie and say individually you're performing well and the institution is not performing well. So I think for me, those are the biggest take homes, that you need to have a balance between the institutional performance and the individual performance. And that can only happen when you start to extract your data and make sense of your data and ask questions about it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sandile. And I think you're quite right. What I'm picking up is that also implementing a data program or running a data-driven municipality is not necessarily an easy thing. There's a culture that needs to change around people, processes, as well as change management in general. And that's where it makes it challenging, and we need to be able to move past those before we can actually measure our performance. So I'll move over to Kutlwano Chaba, who's our Chief Digital Officer at SALGA. And you are strategically placed in the digital unit to actually run the data program in the sector. I would like to get your thoughts around how the presentation from Sivu how it speaks to some of the trends that we are seeing in local government, as well as what can we introduce and what systems can we introduce, processes and things like that, to actually leverage data around performance management.
No, thanks, Rachel. I'll also try and be nice and be kind in terms of what's happening in our space. I think what we've seen is the recognition of the importance of data, the data that we work with on a day-to-day basis. So at an operational level, month-to-month basis at a management level, or year-on-year basis at a strategic level. What we've also seen from leaders in municipalities is that there is a shortage of complete data. So we do have access to data, we can make some decisions, but sometimes we're not confident enough that we have made a fully informed decision. And that speaks to what Usive spoke about, the data sources, identifying where is the data sitting across my municipality. I really don't care if it's in Excel or PDF. I really care if that data is used and is integrated. So you can use any tool you have. We all are mature in different levels. Even the PDFs that are there, we now have new technology that can actually extract data from these static documents and make sense of it and summarize them for you. So actually nothing is lost in that sense. So things like optical character recognition, that's technology that's used in that space. So you can literally right now go to those strong rooms that are there in your municipalities and really scan all those old documents, and using OCR actually make them electronic and start making sense of it. So what we've seen is that actually in critical areas that are normally in billing, finance, and human resources, that's where leadership is focusing their time on. And I think it's a good start, because then it's the recognition that the data is important. So you're starting to see financial managers, municipal managers asking for those dashboards on the financial performance of municipalities, on the state of HR in municipalities, vacancies, overtime, leaves, and so forth. Because the challenge is, I always say to a lot of people, if I go to any municipality and I go to the municipal manager or mayor and I say, what is the state of your municipality? How many phone calls will they have to make to give me those answers? And the more phone calls they make, the more there's a need for them to integrate the data that they have. But the less phone calls they make also means that they're actually moving in the right direction. So we are seeing a lot of adoption of using those spreadsheets, those reports that are coming from all the operational systems that are there, into what we see as what is called BI solutions, where we're integrating all this data and start producing a number of dashboards for management to make decisions. The level of maturity from what we've seen, obviously, is quite vast. I think eThekwini is doing a good job from what I've heard. City of Cape Town has got a data team with data scientists doing that work. You're also seeing Ekurhuleni doing a number of reports on, especially on the finance side of things, but you're also seeing Polokwane now adopting a BI program and so forth. So the recognition of the importance of data is there. It's a journey, right? One thing, it will continue moving. Sometimes don't take for granted what you have. And I like the Excel example, because Excel is such a powerful tool, by the way. If Delano here tells me how many times in a day he spends on Excel, it's probably more on Excel than on the systems that he has that do a lot of modeling and so forth. But I think the most important thing is to ask yourself, what problems are you trying to solve as a municipality? What programs do you want to drive forward? I mean, how are we going to measure that success? Because the data, at the end of the day, allows us to measure the success, make sense of our world, determine how far we are from our goals, and of course, make the right decisions as the decisions that are required. So generally speaking, I think from a SALGA point of view, using the lens, and I think you are fortunate enough to be leading some of the programs that we're doing, is that there's an opportunity to start integrating the solutions as a sector. There is no need for municipalities to use different solutions and systems when they could have common platforms that they can bring their data into and then access them from a single point of entry. And that's what we're trying to drive, a much more common data program, similar approaches, similar reports, because 80% of the time we are doing the same things anyway. And that will actually accelerate how we harmonize the data that we work with, and actually start sharing some of the data that we're working with as well. So I think that's a reflection on what you have said, some of the frustrations that you have expressed, but also bringing you another view from what you've seen from a top point of view from the sector, that actually not all is lost. And you've actually summarized it nicely. That is a journey from 13, 14. And you're not there yet, and you'll never be there, but you always move a needle forward as long as you actually are deliberate enough to actually demand for the value that the data promises. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Casey. And I think you've summarized it nicely. What's coming out strongly for me is the fact that you say there's a shortage of data. And my understanding is that the sector has a lot of data, but your point is quite valid, because if there's a shortage of data, you are highlighting the fact that we need to then identify where the data is sitting, because we've got a large data source. We've got a large data pool out there sitting. We just need to integrate it and put it into systems that will then provide the insights that are required. And Sive, they were quite nice to you. And you did mention to me when we were in the other venue that I should protect you. They protected themselves, I guess. But you can maybe share your reflections and maybe respond to some of the issues that they've raised, maybe get into more specific details around lessons that can be learned from what you've presented or from what everyone else has shared.
Thanks, Rachel. I was just asking you to protect me from Dr. Mbata.
Okay.
If I can be more specific, I heard what he had to ask me before I arrived here, and I knew what I was in for. So thanks for being kind, Dr. Mbata. Look, I think one thing I actually wanted to point out is that words like systems are used rather loosely. I've been reading through some DPSA documents recently, and we came across the EPMDS, which is what is it? It's the Employee Performance Management Development System that was developed by DPSA. Now, when I'm talking to an audience and I say, look, you need to start adopting systems, and then someone says, no, but we've got this system, and I find a document on PDF online calling a PDF document a system, then I start to worry a little bit, because certain terms are just being used too loosely. Okay, so now we're going to say technology, okay, because then we know what we're talking about. We're talking about technology that binds all of this together. And the fact that we must acknowledge that this data is sitting in so many different places. I've worked with systems that require people to have emails in order for you to provide the data that you need. But we know we're South Africans. Not everyone in this country, in fact, the minority of people in this country have email addresses. Therefore, if your system or your technology requires me to have an email address to give you your data, then it's not going to work, full stop. You need to throw that system or that technology out. Beyond that, we've spoken about the various different sources from which you collect data. On my drive over here, as I was coming to this event, I was thinking, I wonder how much data, I wonder how many people in this room are aware of how much data has been collected on you since you woke up this morning, on all your activities. I'm talking about geospatial location data, how many steps you took, your current heart rate, how much data your car consumed, what the state of everything under that hood is, what happened in the plane on the way over, did you use your bank card, have you swiped anywhere at any point in time? You know, there's just such a wide array of data that is available that we will never stop the journey of collecting it, and we will never be able to fully control what format that data arrives in. What we can control is what we do with that data once we have it. And the other important thing is to constantly acknowledge the data that we don't have, because that data could actually provide you with the answer that you are looking for when trying to solve a problem. And I say this, I made the example of the British scientists in World War II, where the guys were literally assessing all the planes that made it back from the battlefield and saying, we need to arm the wings because look at all the bullet holes. This is where they're shooting us. So we need to protect those spaces. But the most important information was the missing data. It was all the planes that never returned that provided the data that was important. And this is what it is. And human beings are so happy to complain, right? If whomever you speak to, the first thing that they can do is tell you what is wrong. But we are very, very far from singing people's praises when they do things right. Right. And I think it's important that we acknowledge what is being done right, be it in municipalities, be it at national level. I think maybe I've gotten to a point, Rachel, where I'm tired of hearing so much complaining. Instead of people speaking about what can be done and what has been done and the achievements that we have as a country and as a nation, you know. And looking at that, yes, I also woke up without electricity this morning. I did not have water for most of my weekend. I'm living in the West Rand. I drove through people protesting on the road this morning. It took me an hour to get out of my neighborhood because they hadn't had electricity for a week, right? In my estate, people don't know what to complain about or who to complain to. Half the time we're speaking to our body corporate, we are speaking to estate management, we are speaking to City Power, we are speaking to Eskom, we speak to City of Johannesburg. We are just pointing a finger in every single direction, right? I just think that we've come to a point now where it's more important that we focus on the solutions and how we are able to help this country move forward as a citizen of the state. And this is the thing that I want to drive home. And that is how I've tailored my message, Dr. Mbata, to say, look, I am going to focus on the positives that we are able to derive from this, from the experiences that we have had. Running these municipalities, I do not imagine for a second is an easy job. I think the challenges that the people in this room are facing are enormous. And so much is not even helping you get this thing forward. You know, you've got more working against you than you have working for you. And then when you walk outside, you are then going to not only experience the problems yourself that you're not able to solve, but you're going to face all the complaints. I can't imagine listening to that call center recordings afterwards, because I know what I see in the groups that I'm part of and what people have to say. So at some point, we've got to give ourselves a pat on the back and say, this is what we're doing right, and this is how we can continue to do right whilst we solve the problems that we haven't been able to find answers to yet.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, Sibu. And I think Delano, Sive, Delano, I think this is an opportune moment, and I believe for you to actually take us through a case study. I believe you have implemented something interesting in the city of Cape Town. Colleagues, this is Delano from the city of Cape Town. He is running the data science team and very responsible for the data program in the city of Cape Town. He will be taking us through his case study, and we'll then open it up for questions from both the virtual platform as well as the floor. You can direct any question to my panelists as well as to Delano. Thank you.
Okay. Good day, everybody, and yeah, welcome. And it's wonderful to see so many people still here and interested in the topic that we're discussing. So I'm going to try and do justice to the thoughtful discussion that was had just now, and take you through an example of how in the city of Cape Town we applied data and data analytics in order to help us solve a performance management problem. Okay, let me see if it's going to work. Yeah, we'll just next slide. Oh, am I going backwards? Okay. Yeah, there's a test. Let's see if I can do it without the slides. Yeah. Okay, thanks. Okay, so that I mentioned, I'm going to take you through a use case, talk about some of the lessons we've learned, and then just the operationalization of it. So I decided to start with this slide. So what it is showing is it's a time series plot of the service standard for service requests closed within Target. So what is a service request? The service request is basically a resident calling into a municipality and having a complaint about something and then seeking assistance from the municipality to sort out the issue. So in the city of Cape Town, we receive roughly about 1.2 million service requests a year. And what you would see if you squint your eyes around February, March 2020, you can see a dip there in the plot. And that's obviously, as we know, when COVID started. So that's when all the when the party started as well for us. So yeah, so that links to the use case, which is in around September, October 2020, the City of Cape Town's executive management team approached myself and my team, the data science team in the city, and said, can you guys look at the data for us and see if you can identify anomalies so that we can understand where should we focus our efforts, our limited resources that we had. So it was part of it was a sort of an initiative, and this initiative ran from October 2020 until December 2021. So when we started with this initiative, we said, okay, one of the first things we need to do is, first of all, just get contact people. So there's multiple service departments involved in the city that solve service requests like in all municipalities. So we said, just give us one contact person or some representative that we can engage with. And then we also said, if we need to come up with metrics, because if we look back, once we finished all of this, we need to determine, have we made a difference and an impact to this space that we were involved in. So we said, okay, let's come up with two metrics that we thought of, and the one was service standards. So that's basically just saying, what is the percentage of service requests that we are able to close within Target? So Target meaning each service request type, like a broken pipe, a pothole, etc. Each of them has a specific date within, or minutes, or days within which you need to fix that problem. And we said, okay, can we get that percentage equivalent to what it was before COVID started? So you saw that dip, and we said, okay, can we get it back, that dip, to the previous levels? That was the one. And then the other one was what we called it backlog, but maybe thinking back on it, a more appropriate term would have been throughput. And all it is saying is, look at what the calls that come in and the calls that we closed within a time window. And the time window we chose was a 6-month rolling time window. So ideally, you want that to be around 0. And again, we said, can we bring it back to the pre-COVID levels? And we thought quite hard about these two metrics, because so these two metrics work against each other. And if you can optimize both of them, then you're optimizing your system. So it's coming back to the discussion about metrics and indicators. So I think this is something that is quite useful to think about. It's like, how do you always try and think about metrics that's competing against each other? If you just focus on the one, you'll neglect the other one, and then obviously, your system won't be optimal. But ultimately, try and get both improved. So the lessons learned. So what I'll do is in the next slides, I'll unpack these, but just to go through them. So, I mean, there's a lot of lessons we learned, but I thought, let me just focus on these 6 ones. And so starting with the first one, it's building a coherent and common view of the world. It's something that takes time. The continuous engagement with the organization and understanding what the root cause of the problem is something that takes a lot of effort, especially in multi-layer or multi-level organizations. A failure in one part of the organization is a failure for the whole organization. And then data without insights is meaningless. And then insights without action is pointless. And then don't take data at face value. And then the last one is about open source software and how in the hands of skilled individuals, we saw it as a priceless tool for us. So yeah, let us unpack each one of these now. So yeah, building a coherent and common view of the world takes time. Okay, so yeah, before we got involved in this data initiative, we actually were involved with multiple service departments to see, can we help them to be more specific about their targets? Currently, and most of you probably might be familiar with this, but most municipalities have a target like a percentage closed within 20 days or 25 days or 30 days for all your service requests. Doesn't matter if it's something that takes 14 minutes or something that takes 180 days. So we said that can't be. We need to come up with something more specific. So seeing, can we make it more granular to each service type, like the potholes or the stolen manhole, wheelie bins, etc. So we designed this tool there on the left, and what it is, it allowed the service departments to play with it and put in a service type, and then it gave you a distribution of calls that was logged and the time it took to resolve it. So that helped them to sort of anchor the discussion in terms of when we went to them. I mean, we went to all of these service departments and had face-to-face with them and said, listen here, this is what the data is showing, the empirical data. Obviously, you've got might have a different reality what's happening on the ground. So let's have a discussion about it and understand what is a reasonable target date. And for all these discussions, we came to the conclusion that, at least for us, with the data that we had, the 80th percentile was the target that we should settle on. So what that means is like 80% of if you're going to fix a lamp, change the bulb, for instance, 80% of the time you should do it within 30 minutes, as an example. And then on the right, what it's showing is when we then took the data, we explored multiple ways of showing it, going back to these service departments and the representatives and saying, this is what we're seeing in the data. Does it make sense to you? Tell us, is this the reality that you're facing? And we were surprised by, so we thought, I mean, it won't take that long to get to that point where we can say, this is a common view of the world and let's go forward. But what surprised us is it actually took about 3 to 6 months, even with the pre-work that we did, and all this back and forth engagements to get to a point where line or service departments were comfortable with the data that we were showing. Even though it was the same data that they are getting from the systems, the underlying systems, we were using the same data, saying it and showing it in the same way, and sometimes obviously in different ways. But the quality of the data wasn't always the best, was, I mean, one reason. And then obviously also people got stuck in the way of just reporting the data and not understanding the analysis behind it. So it is a whole change in how one looks at data and understands data. Yeah, so the lesson that we learned here was basically, if we're going to start a new project, is you have to have some leeway. You can't just come in and think you're going to take the data and then do some fancy analysis and everybody will agree with it and off you go. The lesson that we learned is we always build in some fat and say, it's probably going to take us a couple of weeks or months working with line and service departments before we actually get to a point where we can use that data to tell a story or a narrative about what's happening in the city. Then, so understanding the root cause of the problem is something that takes effort, especially in a multi-level organization, which governments is renowned for. But I mean, there's also large private organizations that's got multiple hierarchical levels. Okay, so when we started this initiative, we said, okay, let's look at the data. We'll identify anomalies in the data. We'll hire a representative in the service department and say, this is what the data is showing you. Can you help us understand in your area, water, electricity, safety and security, why is this data the way it is? And then the idea would be that either that person would tell us this is the reason, this is the root cause, or they would go through their network of people in their department or directorate and say, and come back with information. But we were surprised by how generic this information was. So we would show something specific in an area at a specific depot saying the refuse wasn't collected, as an example. And then what the feedback was is because we didn't have fleet. And what we were expecting to find out was that depot needs 10 vehicles, but now 5 of the drivers were off sick. So 5 vehicles weren't available, and then 2 of them were in the workshop. So basically just get a better picture of it and then take that information together with the data and build a story for executive management and leadership and the organization to get a better understanding of what is the real problem here. So, I mean, yeah, it took time for that representative to get to the person who had the knowledge and who were able to articulate what the root cause is. So, and I think this is by design that governments do, or most large organizations, is they build these hierarchies and they build levels and red tape in. So we found it quite difficult to get to the source and understand what the real problems is. The way we try to deal with this through data is normally executives have a different view of the world. They get a different report or data set than the person there on the ground. So what we try to do with the data is to provide this common view, and make the data open and transparent, so that it doesn't matter what level in the organization is, we're all looking at the same data and we all understand the same picture. We then also advocated for what we called a digger, but all it is it's a business improvement specialist. So the idea was that we would use the data, we would show something, and then this business improvement specialist, they would go into line and they would go dig around and ask that probing questions and try and surface the real issues. So yeah, failure in one part of the organization is a failure in the whole organization. So initially when we started, we said, we just looked at the service request and we highlighted things and we went to the service departments, and then they soon started bringing up all these various reasons. Yeah, we couldn't fix the pothole because we didn't have bitumen, the tender wasn't in place, the staff was off sick, we didn't have fleet, the stores was closed. So it was just multiple reasons why things couldn't be done. So we soon realized that you can't just look at service requests. You have to take a systems approach to this thing. The impact or the decision in one area, if you close a store, it's for that area, and supply chain or procurement is they don't have the full picture. They don't understand the impact it has on the person who has to go and fix the pothole on the ground. So what we try to do is use data to highlight these linkages between all these things, so that we can all have this common view of what is the impact of your decision on somebody else. So I think that data, but what was surprising in this instance was that the data wasn't always readily available. I think it took us some time to get coherent data sets that provided us with a city view. So initially, we relied on individuals or humans in the loop to capture data for us and then feed it back to us, but that is not ideal. So coming back to the previous discussion, try and capture the data in systems. It doesn't matter what systems. Ideally, somebody who's technically strong should be able to get it out of there and then report on it. But because humans get sick, they go on leave. So then your whole process falls flat. So another lesson that I haven't put here is we try to automate everything so that it's not dependent on an individual. So it's fail-proof in a way. Then data without insight is meaningless, and insights without action are pointless. So yeah, I mean, when we started the initiative, we were quite careful to say that we're not here. This isn't a reporting exercise. What we're trying to do here, we called it an understanding exercise. And we were surprised by how strong this culture of reporting is in government or in the city. But I think in most compliance organizations, people who are focused on compliance, is there's a whole team every month. They get together, they gather data from multiple systems, they put it into spreadsheets or other systems, they do pivot tables, they then take that data and put it into another Word document or a PDF. And that's a week gone of their life. And then they put that report out for a monthly report. And then the next month start and they repeat this whole process. So yeah, we were quite surprised by when we engaged in them, the pushback that we got, because they thought we were there adding to this layer of work that they had, the message that we came with is to say, listen here, we don't want any data from you. We don't expect you to report to us. We will give you the data. We will report to you. All we're expecting from you is to tell us and help us understand what is Why is this data showing this? What is happening physically on the ground to make this data do this? What has changed from the week before? Why is things looking better? I mean, what learnings can we take from that? Or if things are getting worse, what happened? What changed? Yeah, so I think that culture, changing that culture from one of reporting to one of understanding and investigating and analyzing and taking action, that was something that took quite a while to get to that point. I think the other thing that we picked up was there's always this habit of reporting upwards. So, I mean, the people, the staff on the ground, they do a lot of work, they put this data together, they feed it upwards. And then for them, it's like going into this black hole. Senior leadership gets together, they talk about it, but they never get the feedback loop back to them. So they don't know what decisions were made, or a few months later, they get a message that they haven't done something. So in this initiative, we played that link between senior leadership and staff. So feeding it upwards, but then feeding it back down again. But I think that is something that is critical. And I think that's where data can help as well, is we started keeping a log of all the actions that was identified on the ground, but then also all the actions that that senior leadership had to take in order to resolve those issues. Okay, I'm gonna not do these justice, but in the interest of time, but I'll touch on them. So the data, don't take data at face value. Just a quick one on this is normally people just look at the data and they see volume. So where is the most volume? And on the left-hand side, if you look at it spatially, you can see the red dots, and that's where people will put all their effort. But we said, we changed that and said, rather focus on the volume in relation to your population, your density. So as you can see, then the problem shifts. It's no longer the middle areas that's the problem. It's now these areas at the corners of the city. So something simplistic like that can change the way that you focus your resources and the efforts. And then open source. So when we started the unit, we said we're just gonna, as far as possible, work with open source tools. So we rather than spending money on software, we said we're gonna spend money on technical professionals. And then we build up this environment for ourselves, a data science environment, an analytic environment. And the reason was that is because most of the data tools and the advanced analytical tools is mostly open source. And you just need people to know how to work with it. So we've designed our own business intelligence. As you can see, those are all examples of things that we're doing. And then we also, if you do more advanced things, more statistically advanced things, there's also tools that we're providing for that. And the reason for that, it doesn't cost anything, it's salaries. It's auditable. So all the work that you do, everything is logged. Anybody can come in and challenge you. And there's a whole history of everything that you've done. And it makes us responsive. So when COVID hit, we could quickly build bespoke visualizations and dashboards, decision-making tools in order to help the organization make better decisions. And then finally, once this initiative was over in December 2021, we then went back to line and said, was this of value? And they all responded positively. So now we're institutionalizing it and operationalizing it. So on a frequent basis, the organization at leadership, at least, they're getting these emails. And in these emails, there's nice graphs for them and plots and visualizations to say where should they focus their efforts. And then there's linkages to dashboards and decision-making tools, etc., for them to dig a bit deeper and understand the more at a granular level what's happening in their areas. And I think, yeah, that's it. So yeah, but like I said, I could probably talk all day about this topic, but yeah, this would just give you a taste of what we're doing in the city of Cape Town now. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Delano. And you've covered it. You've actually summed it very well. You've summed it very well, how we should sort of align our performance management KPIs, our performance KPIs to the strategic objectives of the municipality or of our organization. So while we're trying to sort out our sitting arrangement, I'll open the floor for 2 questions. to our panelists, and also to the speaker, and also 2 questions to the virtual platform. We only have 20 minutes to attend to those, so please make your question as brief as possible. And also when we do answer, please can we keep it short and concise? Thank you. Any questions from the floor?
There are actually, sorry, are there questions from the floor, PD? There are actually quite a few interesting questions from the virtual room.
I don't see anything from the floor, Karen. So would you like to give us 2?
No, thanks very much, Chair. There is a question which reads as follows. Where and how is the data stored? Is the data and information the same? Is there a tool required for this data to be integrated and analyzed? Where the data scientists ideally located in a structure of a municipality? Is it a part of MNE or SPMO? I wish to be answered with a practical example. The other one amongst the others reads as follows and is directed to Dr. Sandile. From a perspective of monitoring the performance of councillors, how can we integrate data from community complaints, petitions, service delivery and infrastructure related issues, and incomplete projects that have been paid for, holding a community meetings and ward committees meetings, etc. This is one aspect from a political management performance that is missing, because under the current state, citizens are struggling to generate evidence that supports the non-performance and non-accountability of councillors.
Okay, thank you. Rachel?
I just need to get an indication of how many questions do we have on the virtual platform so that we allocate them correctly. It's possible that some questions are similar in nature. So maybe let me just get an indication of.
There's one more.
I'll just do one, Rachel.
There's only one more left.
Yeah.
Okay, maybe we can take that one and then throw them back to our
Okay.
panelists.
From Kosi Zuma, he says that the misalignment between organizational and individual performance management is huge, challenges and a threat to effective service delivery. The silo approach has created a culture where performance is mostly reward orientated and not about serving communities. We need urgently to integrate our systems guided by proper data management systems. So it's just a comment also.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for that. So we've got 2 questions. I think, Delano, you can answer the question around data scientists, and then maybe I'll Kutlana as well around that, and then the one that's specifically directed to Dr. Sandeep. We would like to share. Okay. So maybe let's start with Delano.
Okay. Yeah, no, so I think that was a very good question, because I mean, these are things that we about. So I'm going to answer the one about where and how is the data stored, the difference between data information and who looks after it. Is it a performance thing? Is it where does it belong? So I mean, these are things that we grapple with on a daily basis. So yeah, I mean, how we're trying to look at it from a data perspective is to say business as applications or business applications and systems that capture data, where that's for people to do their work, and that provides the integrity of their business processes. And that systems then has data that goes into some sort of a database. And for us, as long as we can access the data in those databases, I think we're comfortable that it remains there. I think but the challenge is to get to be able to access the data at source and then pull it together either, so there's multiple ways that you can deal with this. You can either then pull it into one space, or you can use it at source and transform the data and do the query all at once. So it all depends on the need that you have, but I don't think, as long as the data is in some sort of a data storage system, it doesn't matter. There's multiple ways to solve the problem. That's just some thoughts about that. And then, yeah, so I mean, and I mean, data and the data sources, I think that's ideally you want it as raw as possible. And then you want people who's got analytical skills who can work with the data and then ultimately provide information around it. So what I was talking about is the data on its own, it's nice, but it's what gives it that substance is the other side. So it's what those people that's dealing with the daily realities and saying, and then combining that together, and that's your information, that's your story, and those are the things that you need to focus on. And then, yeah, I mean, something that we are grappling is where in the organization does it belong? So, I mean, my current thoughts, at least, is that ideally you would need some sort of a central unit that's technically strong and with professionals who's comfortable working with data, and then ultimately can pull all this data either together for people to work with and enable other people to work with data. Because I think if you leave it to everybody to do it on their own, all that you'll end up with is duplication of effort, time, cost. People will go out and tender and get their own things. So you need some sort of a central unit who's got the vision and also the skills to execute on that vision. Yeah, so that's it in a nutshell.
Thank you. We'll move over to the next question.
Yeah, it's a very interesting question. But I'll answer it in a simple way because we are already doing it in eThekwini. For those colleagues who have their internet, they could go to strathub.durban.gov.za. One of the things you're going to see under the dashboards, you're going to see what we call What Profiles dashboard. I think what is important from our political leadership is to keep asking the question where. And our politicians in eThekwini have at least asked us that question. Because when we need budget to be approved, we go somewhere. So when we start spending, we don't write where are we spending. So once they started asking us, where are you spending our budget? We then had to deal with the issue of spatial data, of saying, where is the geo-reference of a project? So you avoid a situation, I'm looking around to see whether there's any colleague who come from that province where there's toilets that are built, but they're not on the ground. So we avoid that situation where did I just punch a jab a little bit? I'm sorry. But we all work for government, so it's fine. So we try to avoid that situation that if there's an infrastructure project, it must be on the ground. So what we then have done is to go back to political leadership, and they've said to us, no, that project is not in my place, in my area. Then we point the finger back to the project managers who've decided to put any GPS coordinates. So we try to resolve that. So we're trying to say that system by itself and alone does not resolve issues. You always have to go back to people to verification. So you rebuild your system so that it suits that. So what we are trying to say now is that no project contract should be approved unless there's a special reference point where the project will happen. So we're trying to say a project, so you will have a location of the project, you will have beneficiary wards. So we're doing it by ward, and we're doing it by political zones, and we also doing it by suburbs. So we're going deeper to that level so that we are able to give political leadership, because they are judged by their ward and what happens in their wards. So we are trying to provide information at what level. So that's the answer. But how we've started is saying we've started with just Stats SA data, because it's just there. The census data is already there. You could easily build a white profile that tells the councillor what is in his or her ward, and you give those answers. And then when you start to look at your own projects and expenditure, you're saying you're spending per ward, and you start to give that sort of picture to political.
Yeah, sure. I think, to expand to what the colleagues have said as well, I think it's two questions: understanding the difference with data and information, but two, where do you start? I think the most important thing is to understand that data in its own, it's really meaningless, right? It's raw. and information at least gives you some sort of understanding on context. But in this new age of what was presented, it's about, data and information, you can even use it interchangeably really. But what you want to know is, how am I doing now? What is the status quo? So that, and sometimes we call that business intelligence. But then next is, why is the status quo that way, right? So that's the analytics that you want to bring in. And then you want to start asking yourself, now that I know the status quo and why it is so, what might happen in the future? So now you start looking at the predictive insights that you want to generate from your data. And then of course, in a perfect world, we want to go towards that. Once you've got the data that tells you what the status quo, why the status quo is like that, i.e. the drivers, but also now you know what might happen, the predictive. You want also the data and the technology to now prescribe or even advise on what should be the ideal course of action. So that's the journey of how you could use, or at least have a strategy in mind of how you can start your data journey. But it's always about starting with what you have. The data that you have is mentioned already. There's a number of data sources that we use as municipalities. The reality is not every municipality is eThekwini or Cape Town. With the benefit of the budgets and the people and the teams that they have. Most IT teams, it's just the IT technicians, they can not really do much on the data side. This is where we need to promote a bit the kind of work we're doing at SALGA, where Rachel and team are actually building those dashboards, those similar to the Strat Hub that eThekwini is building, that we could use and plug into as municipalities, so that it becomes a common platform that can be used across municipalities. So if anything, another way, if you want to start, send Rachel an email so they could sit with your team and help you define that data journey on your key areas as well. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I'll call you my experts. Thank you, my experts, my specialists. And this was very insightful. I see we have, before I close, one more hand.
Yes, ma'am, and my
Okay, not a
apologies.
problem. Take that.
Thank you very much, ma'am, and my apologies for that. I was so ignorant, and after this presentation, because I thought data is a subject that is boring, but I need to indicate in the seminar that we are struggling as municipalities, and I'm just going to demonstrate it in just two things. And I hope all municipalities will employ services like what the city of Cape Town is doing in terms of helping in data collection, because I've noted two things: the storage of data and the processing of your data. Because when you go to municipalities, unfortunately, we get to the files of community members, they are empty and nobody's taking responsibility. You get in a file, there's no title deeds, but title deeds, there were issues, there are records that shows title deeds were issued. You go to your death records, people, it's difficult for them to find their graves because our data management is very poor. So I think we need to extend that services, and all the municipalities must begin to practice that, because it's very important. We are struggling a lot. Our internal control systems are very poor in terms of.
There's Program Director Rachel. Apologies, there is a very direct question, maybe in a last parting shot to Dr. Sandile from, let me just put my glasses, Tapsile Ranape. She is directing it directly to you, Dr. Sandile. How do we keep the data current? Our failure in local government also comes from using outdated numbers for planning purposes. For example, population data from Stats SA. And then comment from a lot of people, great presentation, great session overall. Thank you. Thanks.
Well done to the presenters. That's not for me. I didn't present anything. I just try to poke the presenters. How do you keep the data? How do you work on the live data or living data? And most of it, we must accept it's not going to be live. We're not there yet. Some of it is going to be semi-live, or it's not necessarily going to. I think she was probably referring to up-to-date data. the gap between the censuses, and that's the biggest problem that the cities we are talking about, the gap between the census and the next census is too big, and the dynamism of local government is too much for you to plan. Or we've been planning on 3.4 million people, yet we know that for sure it's going to be at least 4 million people or more. So part of what we've started doing, and I think a lot of municipalities could start doing this, a lot of work we're doing as we're doing it through partnerships. We understand that we're not going to be able to do everything by ourselves. So we've started doing some modeling work. We've just completed some modeling exercise with CSIR, where we're starting to model our population to say, this is how our population will grow all the way to 2050. In that way, we're not relying only on the census data to start planning, because we have to wait for 10 years before the new census comes through. I mean, now it's actually longer because the results have not been released. So that's how we're trying to do it. But in terms of just live data, some of it is what I mentioned earlier, that if you have operational systems where you can connect live on those systems, then you are able to see information as it comes through and on real-time basis. There's situations where we can't collect live, and I want to correct one thing about my dislike for Excel. Excel can still be used, but what we've tried to do is say, ultimately you don't want to use Excel, right? Because there's always many versions of an Excel document. So what we've tried to do is saying, can we have one repository where a line function updates the Excel on that live repository, and we connect from that repository. So they don't have to email us anything. They just keep on updating the spreadsheet, and then we connect live. And that could be live too. So as soon as they update there, that's live as live can be, because remember, live is contextual. It's like now. It's like the issue of time in South Africa now. So we take it from that perspective to say, if you updating it, then it means that it's up to date. Then your dashboard will update almost immediately, and the insight that your strategic leadership gets is what you've updated as line function, because we cannot determine what is live and what is not live, but the line function can, unless we are getting it from the system, because your system will not lie to us as humans would. Thanks.
Karen, I think that's the only question. Okay, thank you. I'm not sure if anybody else would like to add before we close to the question that has been posed to Dr. Sandile. If not, I'll just have my closing remarks and appreciate the time and also the fact that my panelists were had insightful information to share with us. And just as we close, I think for me, for me, the message is pretty clear that the value of data needs to find its way to the core business of our day-to-day. And SALGA is available to assist, understand your problem statements, crafted in such a way that we're able to identify or develop the relevant analytic outputs or dashboards to make you see in one view some of the areas that you're concerned about. And we're not working alone. We also have collaborations with other organizations like CSIR. We're also working closely with the City of Cape Town to also learn from them as well. So we all have common problems, and we as SALGA are trying our best to address them using common approaches. So thank you very much for your time. And thank you again, my fellow colleagues.
Thank you. A huge round of applause for Rachel and the speakers. The presentations that have been shared today will be uploaded on the microsite, so you would be able to access them. But huge appreciation from the audience, Rachel and speakers, for the insightful and practical presentations and guidance that you've made around navigating this new currency and way of being. So thank you from our side. And we hope that you in the audience are able to take these learnings from today practically back and start to implement them back in your municipalities. A couple of logistics from our side, and if my speakers don't mind staying on stage, we've just got a few minutes. Is that okay? Thank you. A couple of logistics before we move over to closure. So we are ending this part of the afternoon, but there will be an evening program which starts at 6:30. And before I hand over to Prof to do the closing, a couple of reminders. So if you look at the program on microsite, you'll see that the program for the evening starts at 6:30. For those of you that are joining virtually, you will use the same link to connect with the evening program at 6:30. For those of you who are going to be joining it physically, the venue for the evening session is this venue. So the team is just going to turn this venue around and you'll come back here. You have a little bit of time now to go back, refresh, and prepare to look fabulous for this evening. The lineup looks really exciting, and we hope that you have a fantastic evening and take lots of great pictures this evening and enjoy the entertainment. Tomorrow, we are going to start promptly at 8:30. And we are asking you, please, 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 can we be on time? Can we be punctual so that we can start the program at 8:30? We've got a pretty packed program for tomorrow. And we also want to do some of those gifts that we did today. Prof is not going to be with us tomorrow. And I'd like to ask you to all join me to please give Prof a huge round of applause for his fantastic program directorship today. So Prof, thank you. And it's been an absolute pleasure working with you. And can I call on you to please do the closing remarks?
Colleagues, I know it's been a very long day for you. But I must commend you, especially those who are still here and also on the virtual platform, I think, for your patience and your level of participation in the discussions today. We've had, I must thank Salga as well for organizing a very, very good day with very good panelists, with very great presenters, and they certainly made sure that we got the best team for last. So let's give an applause to this particular youngish team, I must add. I think that the number of important issues have been discussed and raised today. Quite a few stand out for me. And my appeal to you is that you take all the lessons or the learnings that you had today back with you to your work environment, and try and apply as much information as you possibly can. Because as the last speaker said, I liked the words you used. You said, let's talk about solutions and not spend too much time worrying about problems facing our nation. And that's basically, I think, the spirit that all of us need to take. And as I said earlier on, you as people working in the local government sphere, I don't know how much I can emphasize this point. Weight in your shoulder. So much depends on you, on what you do as individuals, as municipalities, as departments, to change the mood in the country. People are so pessimistic about what's happening in the country, and a lot can change if you go back to your offices, to your provinces and municipalities, and just do something slightly more different. Tell yourself you want to improve the lives of citizens of our country, to just help improve the mood, because if this negative mood that exists in our country today continues, chances are that people are going to start losing confidence in our democracy. They lose confidence in the state, and they lose confidence in you as employees working in municipalities. So there's so much you can do. And please bear in mind that, in fact, we talk about systems, we talk about data, we talked about changing or revising the laws, dealing with coalition governments, et cetera, et cetera. At the end of the day, who can actually make, and just remember, as universities are there to help you. If you need skills or you need to enhance your capabilities to do your jobs better, remember that you can call on universities all over the country to help you face the challenges that you face on a day-to-day in your work environment. I mentioned earlier that I'm working in the city of Joburg in one of the group performance audit committee meetings. I sit there and look at the eyes of those officials who are giving us reports. I see people who are committed to want to make a difference. But the environment in which they find themselves, because of the political upheavals they're facing on a day-to-day basis, makes life very difficult for them. They have to go back to communities and they face criticism that they're working for a state that is not functioning, that is incompetent, that is inefficient. And yet I sit in these meetings and see that these are very young, dedicated, well, not only young, but also old people are there as well. But people are dedicated to want to serve. I mean, we work in government, I worked in government for 17 years. My commitment was to make a difference in the lives of all South Africans. And as I'm looking at you in this room today, I know that you are in these jobs, not just for the sake of earning an income. We want to make a difference, but let's make it count. Use conferences such as this one to learn something new from your colleagues, from the experts that we've brought to you to tell you about what's happening in the world out there, but use that to make sure that you make a difference in the lives of your people in your cities, in your municipalities. And let's not lose hope. There's so much we can do together if we work together. I know that we need the political or elected leaders who are here. I know that we're facing lots of challenges. The coalition government discussion we had earlier on, I wish we had another 2 hours to talk about that, because I know as you go back to your offices, those are practical issues you're going to face. Some of you don't know who's going to be your mayor next week. In this city, we don't know our city manager in Joburg for the past 11 months. That's a serious indictment on our political system in this country today. And these conferences are important because they give us an opportunity to talk about these challenges. But at the end of the day, we got to think about solutions. What are we going to do together to make the lives of our people better on a day-to-day basis? So with these few remarks, I'm going to wish you a great evening tonight. I know Salga has prepared a wonderful program for you, but it's a working session as well. So there's going to be a lot of work. And our friends who are on virtual line, please stay on because you're going to enjoy a wonderful program. I'm told there's some entertainment as well organized for you. So women, go and freshen up. I know you need to put up a bit of makeup and all of that. I know guys want to go out and have a smoke and have a beer or so, but get ready for a great evening, but also don't sleep too late. Tomorrow you still have another packed day. I've looked at the program. I want to tell you, there's a lot of learning that's going to take place tomorrow. So get ready, refresh, and be ready for great discussions later on tomorrow. Thank you very much. A great session indeed.